The United States Supreme Court just issued 5 critical opinions. It was supposed to issue 6, but one of the cases will be re-argued next term. I'll get to that in a minute. That was a surprising announcement. But I want to break down all 5 opinions issued today, what you need to know, and just break them down in easy, understandable ways because they're significant. All 5 of them have significant issues that will impact many Americans. So the first major case was Trump versus Casa Inc., which is the nationwide injunction case. This case involved whether or not a district court can block an executive order that deals with redefining birthright citizenship to apply that block to all states and all districts across the country. Essentially, what happened was Donald Trump entered an executive order, signed an executive order that redefined birthright citizenship, saying that if you are born in the United States of America to 2 undocumented parents, you no longer have automatic birthright citizenship. Typically, under the 14th Amendment, if you are born in America, you are entitled to citizenship. He wanted to change that. Well, multiple districts around the country issued what is called an injunction. They said, no, this is not constitutional. We're going to block it. But we're not just going to block it for, say, New Yorkers. We're going to block it for every American across the country. Well, today, the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision said, hold up, you can't do that. Essentially, universal injunctions that block decisions for everyone across the country likely exceed the authority of the executive. Justice Barrett wrote for the majority in a 6-3 opinion. Now, what this does, it opens up the door to some districts around the country to now allow this executive order and other executive orders, because there are plenty that have been blocked universally, to apply to certain Americans. So it's going to apply in some places, not others. Now, we're going to see the impacts. We're going to see whether or not additional challenges are brought. It didn't touch the overall merits of the executive order, whether or not Trump changing the birthright citizenship meaning was constitutional. That's an argument for another term. Before I continue, please consider subscribing to my Substack by clicking the button below or sending a donation via Venmo to Aaron-Parnas to support to my Venmo. The second case is Mahmoud versus Taylor. This case involved a parent's ability to opt out children from lessons involving LGBTQ plus topics in schools on religious grounds. The Supreme Court ruled that religious families likely have a First Amendment right to opt their children out of public school lessons involving LGBTQ topics. This was also a 6-3 decision, with Justice Alito writing for the majority of the 3 liberal justices, once again dissenting. It focused on whether families could avoid certain classroom content based on religious beliefs, specifically content dealing with LGBTQ Americans. Justice Sotomayor dissented, writing, quote, "The reverberations of the court's error will be felt, I fear, for generations. Unable to condone that grave misjudgment, I dissent." Now, the ruling doesn't end the case, but gives early legal support to the family's claim of religious rights. It dealt with whether or not they're entitled to what is called a preliminary injunction. They are. And so now these parents can opt their kids out of any rule in a school that requires students to attend public school curricula that may deal with LGBTQ topics. The third case was Kennedy versus Braidwood Management. It dealt with the Affordable Care Act appointments. The Supreme Court ruled that members of a healthcare task force under the Affordable Care Act don't need to be appointed by the president or confirmed by the Senate. This task force helps decide whether preventative health services insurance plans must cover. This was a 6-3 decision. It was a win for liberals. Justice Kavanaugh wrote for the majority along with the 3 liberal justices and Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett, saying that members are, quote, inferior officers who can be appointed by the Secretary of HHS, which essentially supports how the task force currently operates and preserves its role in shaping what preventative care is covered under the Affordable Care Act. This is a win for those who support the Affordable Care Act. The next case involved Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. It dealt with whether or not a Texas law that required age verification to visit porn websites to verify users' ages before granting access was constitutional. And in a 6-3 decision, the court sided with the Fifth Circuit and said that essentially the law is constitutional. The law can remain on the books. Texas can impose these age verifications prior to signing on to a porn website. Justice Kagan, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Jackson once again dissented. The fifth case is FCC versus Consumer Research, which is a challenge to the subsidized telephone and internet for rural communities. The Supreme Court upheld the funding structure for a program that helps provide phone and internet access to schools, libraries, rural areas, and low-income communities. It was created under the 1996 Telecommunications Act, funded by telecom companies, and essentially passed the cost on to consumers. A nonprofit helps manage the fund, and this is a major win for a number of people who wanted to essentially roll back money that helps people pay less for telephone and internet services in rural communities. So, win 6-3 decision, Justice Kagan wrote for the majority. And the final case was Louisiana versus Callius, which was a redistricting case. It dealt with whether or not the congressional maps drawn by the Louisiana legislature were constitutional. The court said it's going to re-argue the case in the next term. The justices want to hear more arguments before making a final decision. They're going to issue a subsequent order soon. So we'll see what happens. But that was a surprise. There's no decision there yet. That's all the news right now. Those are all the 6 cases. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know any questions, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So stay tuned for more.